Hi everyone. Uh, so today we have our next book club meeting, and here we are going to have a presentation by Bharat on the book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. So I just looked at the reviews for this book, and it is 4.6 out of 5 in Amazon. So I'm just curious how it's going to play. But before that, I'd like to introduce our anchor or the presenter. Uh, so, uh, mm, his name is Bharat. He's a medical doctor by training and a life coach. Also, a laughter yoga leader and a passionate advocate for play. During his journey to become an MD, he lived in a gurukul with sadhus, immersing himself in deep spiritual practice and simplicity. Today, he brings together clinical insight, ancient wisdom, and joyful science of play to help others heal, grow, and rediscover the wonder of being alive. Whether through coaching, laughter, or soulful storytelling, Bharat inspires people to live with clarity, lightness, and purpose, and to remember that life is a game best played with heart. He is not a practicing doctor as he's yet to go through the residency training, but we are sure he's as good as a doctor. Over to you, Bharat.
All right. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Coach Jissy. I appreciate it. I'd like to welcome everybody, wherever you are, online, offline, in the future, perhaps when you're tuning into it. I appreciate your time and your presence. Um, so, first and foremost, I'd like to thank all everybody that's involved in organizing this. So Jesse and all the other members from CJ, Coaching Journey Hub, appreciate it. Thank you for all your efforts behind the scenes. You're the unsung heroes. So much gratitude. And with that being said, I'd like to share my screen. So the book is called The Game of Life and How to Play It. This is by Florence Scovel Shin, and I'm your presenter, Dr. Bharat Kumar Madapu. And one moment, let me see if I could share the screen. Right. I hope that's coming through.
Yeah.
Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, uh, so I wanted to, instead of just calling this, say, like a summary and just kind of grabbing just the gist of was hoping to make this book come alive for those that are tuning in and listening in. If that's okay, I'd like to invite you all to just close your eyes, relax, think of it as a coaching session, perhaps. You could remove your glasses, just relax, just tap into your breath. We'll just start off with 3 deep breaths. Just notice the inhale, the pause, the exhale, the pause. Just tapping into it. A couple more cycles. And as you're getting grounded, just I just thought that I would connect us all to the author and the wisdom that has driven this work. The author Florence Scovel, she happens to be, or she was, a member of the United Church, and I'll start going into it. As Jesse mentioned, this book is a wonderful book. I happen to pick it up because I'm like, I want to read something short, something sweet. And this book happened to be just that. Um, it was published almost a century ago. Can you believe that? A century ago, and it's still relevant. It comes highly recommended in one of the channels that's known for its audiobooks. There's about 11 plus million views on it. And there's a lot of people still listening to it. And even in self-help coaching spaces, self-improvement spaces, this book is still relevant to this day and still comes highly recommended. And it varies, like, and it's attracting people of all walks of life, all age groups. I've seen people from, about people in their later half of their life, and even the younger generation picking up too. So, which made me quite happy. So now, so author, she was born in 1871. She was by profession, initially, she was an illustrator. And then later on, she went on to write many books. One of them is The Game of Life and How to Play It. Another one was, is, and there's few more works that are popular. Um, she happens to be a great great granddaughter of Francis Hopkinson, who's the founding father of United States. He even helped in designing of the earlier flag for United States with like 13 stars. Now it has no, about 51 stars in the flag. Now, and this author is also an early influencer of Louis Hay. Um, most of you may be familiar with her works. So, and in many ways, Florence Scovel is kind of like the pioneer um, that was laying the groundwork for our modern coaching um, stands upon. So, diving into the takeaways or her approach and drawing parallels into why her work is relevant in this coaching space, let's dive into it. I hope it's still visible.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so there's about six. Okay, great. Whoops. So there's few takeaways that we could look at here. First, she mentions the power of spoken word and affirmations, and in one of the earlier chapters of the book, she goes on into great details about the examples and the lives at the time, where people would approach to her, just like the clients of today come to us and approach us for coaching advice. And she would help them with realizing the value or the power of the spoken word, the affirmations, so to speak, reframing their belief systems, imagination, visualization. So it's a form of, she talks about imagination and not necessarily visualization, so to speak, but using imagination as way to design life, and letting the visions come through intuitively instead of consciously creating it, so to speak. So that all comes with creating awareness And she was facilitating visions and goal setting back in 1900s or late 1800s, right? And then she was, and she also helped with people discover their intuition and helping them tap into their gut intuition, um, which we also do um, with like the mindsets and cultivating trust for our clients. And because she was culturally or spiritually aligned, she would help people tap into that aspect of them, into faith and ultimately their core belief system. So just going by the words here. So first and foremost, just don't want to miss anything here. So first, she talked about the key takeaway would be like the power of spoken word and affirmations, which draws parallel to like evoking awareness through language and facilitates the client growth, right? So the application of it would be like using affirmations and reinforcing empowering beliefs, right? Many of the time, um, you know, the clients, they would come to us and they're like, "Oh, I've tried affirmations," but say once you're or once they've gotten to do it correctly, they're actually tuning into the right process. And Florence Scovel Shin was helping with that and belief shaping reality. So, like, that would be the cultivation of clients' belief systems, challenging their limiting beliefs. So, reframing limiting beliefs and supporting cognitive restructuring, things of that nature. And the visualization and imaginings. So, when a lot of us also facilitate with vision, goal setting, future pacing, things of that nature. So, we encourage a lot of future self visioning, creating visualization. So she was doing this back in the day, early 1900s. Um, and then next, she was also helping people discover their intuition. So trusting the intuition, where we also guide our clients and coachees to embody the coaching mindset and then cultivating trust within themselves, trusting the process, and trusting their life as they're moving forward. Helping them trust their inner guidance. And a lot of the time, we get them into a space, that sacred silence, that sacred, um, quietness, nothingness, where the magic happens. These big revelations and aha moments that happens. She would recommend that, and it was a big proponent of her work, where she would tell the clients or people who come up to her, or even her friends, that you know, go home, just meditate. Get it, tap into your deeper self, and let the visions come in, and you trust that. And that has worked quite a bit for almost all of them. And then she gives a lot of examples throughout the book for that. Um, so this is also like in alignment with the spiritual alignment and then inspired action too. So where us, the modern life coach, would maintain presence. So they evoke awareness and they align actions and values. So we're supporting the alignment of like the goal setting, and then helping the coachees surrender to the process. Okay. And of course, um, just one-to-one words, or just words directly to just a conversation back and forth, doesn't always help. And she used the special, the techniques of stories and parables, which we all love and connect to at a deeper level. So she would teach through parables and stories, Because she was the organization that she was part of, very heavy into like the biblical stories and proverbs and things of that nature. Um, she there's a lot of references in that sense. So one of them would be the uh, the three men or the three kings who were told to dig ditches in anticipation of a rain, and these ditches that were being dug would be in desert. Like there's no winds, there's no rains, there's no clouds that they were seeing, and it was just pretty much arid climate. And in that situation they were told to dug ditches in anticipation of abundance of rain. And she used parables and stories like that, um, which ultimately led to transformation in many ways, for the person that she was helping. So, in our modern sense, it would be like the coachees. So, the stories and metaphors that helped create insights. Okay. Now, there's about 10 chapters in the book. So, the first one is titled The Game, and then the law of prosperity, the power of word, the law of non-resistance, law of karma, law of forgiveness, casting the burden, love, intuition or guidance, perfect self-expression or the divine design, denials and affirmations. Okay, so many of us, and even for this holds true for the clients also, we when we think of, usually they approach us, the coaches, as they're facing troubles in life, and at that time it might look like war. But um, what I really love about this book is it changes it, and it changes the perspective and helps it look at it in terms of more of a play and a game that is to be played, and you could play it joyfully, and that just happens to be the nature of the author, and that comes through in her illustrations also. So I would highly recommend, if you're interested, check out like her illustrations. um, it comes through. So coming back to this book itself, um, how is this? A lot of the times when we're reframing the perspective of, or helping create the perspective for the client or the coachee, we're just asking them to look at things differently, and all of a sudden that creates that insight, that shift. They're like, "Whoa, I didn't think of it like that." You know, so in that sense, life is not a battle per se, but it is a game, and that is guided by spiritual laws. To win the game, one must align with divine principles like faith, non-resistance, love, and the power of the word. The words that, not just words that we speak, but the words that we're thinking, uh, tapping into that inner voice. What are we telling ourselves? The narratives that we're creating behind the scenes when we're not in conversation, so to speak, or in a dialogue with others. Moving on to law of prosperity. So prosperity. So generally we're thinking like, okay, prosperity. It's something that, okay, you work hard and you get this particular reward, and that would be the manifestation of, like, say, house, car, bungalow, and so on, things of that nature, materialistic, so to speak. But the perspective shift here is kind of tapping into the alignment, right? So once one is spiritually aligned, then things uh, would kind of be an outpouring. And with that outpouring, there would be, the prosperity would manifest. So one must have clear subconscious beliefs. So the author, she mentions, like, a lot of the times, when we're thinking, we're not like the subconscious. So she talks about the subconscious, the superconscious, which is like the God consciousness. And the subconsciousness is not able to differentiate between like what is a joke or what is reality. So doesn't have a sense of humor, she says. And in the book, she even gives an example of like a young girl who would dress in black clothes just for amusement. And people around her would also find it very amusing. And then they would, they would encourage it in that sense. And unfortunately, later on, once she was married to the love of her life, uh, tragically, the husband passed away and she turned out to be a widow. And the author implies that, when like we ought to be very careful as to the things that we do in life. And she was connecting the dots of like the lady who's now a widow, how she dressed as, like dressed in all black when she was younger. And she would be moping, even though it was just for fun and amusement. Um, and then, a few more other things that were kind of highlighted in this chapter would be like um, right thinking. So just as negative thinking or something that is not conducive for one's growth would um, stop one from progressing, right thinking can also and would lead to abundance, right? So here in this chapter, she mentions an example of tithering, which is about like 1/10 of somebody's earning, giving it opens up the supply of abundance. This a lot of this giving away 10% of your income is practiced in many groups around the world, and they claim that this is a practice that kind of helps them sustain that abundance, monetarily speaking. And also that holds true in terms of like giving oneself, say, community service and things of that nature also. The author, when the clients approached her and asked, oh, this is not working out for me. I'm kind of like in debt. Um, how do I go about this? She mentions this aspect of why don't you and she helps them get into a certain state, right? And helps them get to this state where they're now the action is coming from a state of already having been received something. So once that happens, then the results, which were phenomenal, and she gives plenty of examples. She gives an example of like a person who was being sued for $3,000, and this $3,000 back in the day was a huge amount. Um, and once she got them into a space of like abundance, and they were acting as if they're already in a state that has received that which they're hoping for, the results and reality played out in an amazing way, and often in ways that was like you can't even or one cannot even fathom as to how it went about or how it rolled out. Okay. Um, okay. So I had mentioned, I've given the example of like digging the ditches in anticipation of rain in a desert. Um, so that was, kind of tying into this law of prosperity, especially in the times where one is feeling down and dejected and feels like giving up. And in the book, it's also mentioned that one needs to wait. And often it is at the 11th hour that things start to open up and the help that you've been seeking for comes through. So, and looking at it from a bird's eye point of view, just kind of stepping back, looking at the bigger picture, all the clients that come to us generally come when they're just about to give up. And once that space is created, the breakthrough actually happens. And then, they start to see the change that they've been hoping for so desperately start to become a reality. Now, in terms of reframing our thoughts and belief systems, here this chapter kind of goes in alignment with that. So the power of word. So the spoken word creates energetic patterns in one's reality, and affirmations are the tools that aligns the consciousness with truth and divine order. And words can either create or destroy, right? And a simple way to program the subconscious, even though you may have been brought up in, say, family or an environment where there's some programs that are subconsciously programmed within you that are not conducive for your growth and you're blooming. Now with affirmations and with the power of word, one can strongly um, create a sense of identity and a stronger and a stronger program that could override these other weaker programs, right? And even idle words would have real effects. So being mindful of what we say, what we think, even though they're not spoken, those they have an outcome. So when one is to speak, you're only supposed to speak that which you truly desire. And in one of the other books that Florence Scovel Shin has written, um, this she heavily focuses on the word being the wand of power. So for anybody that's interested, it would be a good recommendation. And next is the law of non-resistance. Um, so, and this kind of goes in alignment with a lot of other famous teachings too, especially like say Tao Te Ching from the East, and in many other manifestations of the same teaching too. So, what is that teaching here? So, like struggle when one is struggling, this active struggle strengthens the very condition one resists. So non-resistance, so just kind of letting things be and not adding fuel to the fire, so to speak, helps one be at more ease. And when we're creating that space for our clients, this we see this at play, and it's a real magic. And it always fascinates me and dazzles me. Um, so there's that. So non-resistance opens the path for divine solutions, especially once we haven't seen or anticipated. So what you resist and persist, we've all heard that. Non-resistance is power and not weakness. And even in terms of adversities or adversity being manifested in, say, form of enemies, um, one is to bless the enemies so that it dissolves the block. And Florence Scovel Shin mentions in the book that bless your enemy so that they are robbed of the ammunition, right? And then there's many examples given in the book as to when people have kind of blessed their enemy or prayed well for their enemy, um, the situation just dissolved and disappeared. And just letting go brings about a peace within them and helps them flow better with the situations and um, and then correction of the situations ultimately. How are we doing with the time?
So we are 35 minutes into the session.
Okay. All right. Okay. Moving on to chapter 5. Thank you. Moving on to chapter 5. So this is the law of karma and law of forgiveness. Um, so Florence Scovel Shin, the United Church, this is it helped pave path for the new thought, um, and for like the beliefs of the church is that there's no particular ritual, so to speak. Um, there there's no set dogmas. One is, um, the belief is that, um, all the goodness one believes leads to God, um, and the object of worship, so to speak, or salvation ultimately. So in that sense, um, it's very progressive to kind of look back and see that somebody from 1900s, they're including things of from different cultures, like say law of karma, right? And that comes from the Eastern aspect um, of of the world back then. So what is karma? So whatever, so think of it as like a boomerang, so to speak. Whatever, like whenever you throw it, it comes back. So with every action and word that is generated, there is a corresponding effect that kind of comes back. So forgiveness, um, on which Christianity is based of, it neutralizes the karma and resets the spiritual field, is what Florence Scovel Shinn had mentioned. So um, in that sense, keeping keeping this in mind, one is ought to be very careful with the actions and words, as this pretty much sets the path, and one ought to be careful as not to cause more harm than they'd wish, especially in times of trouble. So moving on to there's an aspect in the book where um, Florence Scovel Shinn mentions that this is taken from the Bible too, where it says, "Stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord." And she also mentions the Lord can be looked at the law. So stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord. So in terms of how it applies to us in the coaching field, um, we often in the coaching conversation, um, when the coachee comes in, and the coach, of course, they're both in a certain ambiance of stillness, right? And it is this wonderful stillness, silence, quietness. The magic happens and it unravels, and that ultimately in this situation leads to salvation, helps them go forward, right? And often, like in terms of say relationship um, kind of situations for coaching, like forgiveness plays a huge role. We've seen clients just, and it's the tears of the clients. It's kind of symbolic of where they're discovering this forgiveness, and whether it be for themselves or somebody that has, um, that has harmed them, um, and then letting go of this resentment that's holding them back. And all these things are kind of covered in the book also. And cognitive reframing, so like the wrong thoughts being reversed. These are also the themes of the book. And forgiveness, we've seen many a times, it helps one light up, after that initial tussle. It just, the barriers are broken down, and now one has a breakthrough, and now they're able to live a life that is more joyful, and it's truly transformational. Um, Next up is chapter 6, casting the burden. So it's impressing the subconscious. I've kind of touched upon this earlier, where the the young girl who was dressed in black, kind of symbolic of the dress of a widow. She was casting, or she was impressing her subconscious with this, even though um, unbeknownst to her at the time, the repercussions of it, right? Um, so here are a few things that are mentioned or that are touched upon. So like worry is a misuse of imagination. So burdens must be surrendered to infinite intelligence. This is also piggybacking off like being still and surrendering to that stillness. Um, and and then transformation kind of is born from there. At the subconscious mind, it acts upon deep beliefs. So spiritual surrenders imprints new outcome also, right? So one is putting down the burdens, and with surrender, now one is open to that transformation and releasing the worries to God, so to speak. And worry is a wasted energy, um, which is true, right? I mean, how often can we, being in a coach's seats, like we've had thoughts of like we see the potential in the clients. We're like, "Oh, if only they did not worry about this, and if they only were able to execute to their full capacity, then this thing could be easily overcome, so to speak." So, just a wonderful reminder for us all that worry is a wasted energy, and um, and being a channel and not the doer. A coach is an embodiment of this, right? We're not here for to propagate or further propagate our own agenda. We're there for the client, being a channel of transformation, um, and not necessarily the doer. And the doing just happens, right? And then affirmations kind of helps the calm anxiety and helping the client trusting the divine process. Moving on to 7, love. Very hard thing to do sometimes, but it is a foundational power that is behind all spiritual success. And in the book, she also mentions that like it is a fundamental power that opens up a different dimension. One where magic and miracles happen. The fourth dimension is kind of opened up, so to speak. And love is a force that harmonizes all. Excuse me. And without love, nothing matters. And love is so powerful that it just dissolves fear, and it radiates, and radiating love is an attractive force in itself, right? And a lot of the times, especially in like the relationship field, when one is either hurt or at the crux of the relationship situation is the expectation, right? It may have started off with true love, and then now it has turned into something else because of different dynamics. So it's a nice reminder for um, one to know that, or to be reminded that true love expects nothing, right? And in that there is freedom, and in that there's prosperity for all that is involved. And that is a power that, it's not just two people, two parties that are involved, but also a third person that is viewing this from out from just being in the ambiance of it. Look at the child per se, right? So when the parents are happy, the child growing in that environment, like they also um, they bloom, they blossom, right? So without love, even spiritual knowledge becomes hollow. Um, in the church choir, um, like without that devotion, or any of the spiritual settings, prayers, where there is chants and the spiritual music is being played. Like without love, there's only just the sounds of brass and tinkling cymbals. Um, so just it's always a nice reminder to come return to this. Simply love the foundational power. All right. So kind of going into intuition and guidance, when one taps into themselves, there is this wonderful insight that kind of comes in. This is why, like practices like, say, meditation, things of that nature, where one is um, grounded enough for the flashes of insight, um, to that burst forward, right? So intuition is the voice of infinite intelligence, right? And true success and safety depends on listening and obeying this inner voice. So we know in the coaching field that listening, one of the most important things we could possibly do, and it's the depth of listening that brings about the transformation, the true transformation that one wishes to bring in every single session. Um, intuition is divine wisdom. It comes as a flash, right? When that transformation or that breakthrough happens for the client. Um, following this intuition avoids mistakes, and trusting this inner voice builds that resilience in the coachee. Right? And ultimately, like the next step after that would be the self-expression, right? Like once they've embraced all these visions, and they have an idea and a clear path and a picture of who they are striving to be, now the coachee can march on full stride. So each person, this chapter 9 talks about each person having a unique and divinely orchestrated purpose. So when one stops striving and begins aligning, this purpose is revealed with ease, right? So just kind of settling down into that intuition helps one reveal this. So everyone has their divine path that can be discovered. And then fulfilling it brings joy and prosperity, not just themselves, but those around also. And many of coaches can vouch for this, and which is what they would love to spread. Um, and then affirming right place and timing. So Florence Scovel-Shinn, her method is, many of the times she would affirm, or she would tell the clients that, like, or get them to a space where they're completely believing that, or affirming that they're in the right place at the right time. And this has worked miraculously. And then trusting the divine design fully, right? And last but not least, the denials and affirmation. So it's a double-edged sword, the words that we use, and one ought to be very careful and mindful as to how to go about it. So uh, with spiritual reprogramming, our words that we use and the belief systems, um, they're very key. So our denials and affirmations, they're the tools for spiritual programming or reprogramming, right? So denials help cleanse the subconscious mind, um, and which goes both ways, right? Like if you're denying yourself of something that you would want, you're kind of cutting it off. But if one is programmed or misprogrammed, now this denial can help this cleanse the subconscious mind, right? And then affirmations implants truth and attracts the good, right? And then denying fear, doubt, disease, and lack with conviction. She has given few examples of when one is very sick, and with using affirmations and and then reprogramming, one has cured themselves of certain illnesses or certain patterns, so to speak. So she and then yeah, with this, replace them with affirmations of health, love, and abundance. And then daily practice transforms the inner world, and as an extension with time, the outer world also. So, few takeaways. So, life is not random. It follows spiritual law. It uses use of word, faith, and love consciously, can be very transformational. And keeping this in mind during our coaching sessions, and even when we're wearing different hats, can be very transformational for ourselves too. Um, and then really tuning into intuition, divine design, releasing fear, acting in faith, and more importantly, tapping into these wonderful aspects um, becomes easier when we look at life as a game as a game that is to be played, and how you can play joyfully with clarity and trust. And that would be all.
Excellent presentation, Bharat.
Thank you.
I have three questions, but before that, let me give the others a chance. Amba,
Sure.
Srividya, Shampa, do you have any questions for Bharat?
It's a beautiful presentation. Thank you very much. But right now, I am into this. In fact, nothing is coming to in my mind. But it's the book is itself is very nice. Thank you so much, and your presentation is also very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no questions from my side also, Bharat. Thank you so much for the insights from the book. Affirmations is something that I personally practiced, myself, and it's really powerful. As you said, though the book is the author might be really not very recent, but I think the methods that she has suggested are very relevant even today. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Amber has sent a message. Thank you. Lovely explanation. Okay, let me grab my chance. Law of non-resistance. Struggle strengthens the very condition one resists. Uh, what does it mean? Means in which context? Just is
Yeah.
there any? Yeah.
Sure. So when one is found themselves, say, struggle, turmoil, or difficult times, they're often like forced um, to exert more power. It's like, okay, there's a wall, maybe I'll punch through it, maybe I'll punch through it, right? So like, when you're punching through it, you're hurting your own self, right? But if you had just stepped back, maybe the wall just ends just a couple feet to the right, and instead of punching through it, you would just go around, kind of thing. And many of times, I'm sure you've had this also. If you just rested instead of trying to bulldoze through it, or maybe after like a good night's sleep, or maybe you're playing, a beautiful insight just comes. And or maybe somebody just picked up like a tool that you were looking for all around, and just like, that was stopping you from progressing forward. Now all of a sudden, this play is what was needed for you to find this tool, or literally or metaphorically, so to speak. Um, so in that sense, just letting the flow happen or letting things play out as they are, doing your best, of course, but not being set in one path to the point where you're hurting yourself. Because
Mm.
once you apply pressure, like, the pressure is kind of applied back or the force is applied back, and that may be detrimental to where you would want to go.
Mm.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, sure it does.
Okay.
Next one is when one stops striving and begin aligning, then the purpose comes or something like that.
Yes.
Aligning
Yes.
with what? Can
Yeah.
you explain?
Sure. Because this book, the way, the perspective of the author, it's kind of built on faith. And as I mentioned, she was part of like the Unity Church. That's kind of like, very inclusive of like different walks of life, different philosophies and things of that nature, right? In that sense, aligning oneself with their highest self, like super consciousness, so to speak, kind of like, a plug that needs to plugged into the higher consciousness. And there's like downloads that are kind of happening, so to speak, right? Like these visions, these insights that one probably would not have had if they were just, keeping their eyes open and then just consciously seeking uh, in this realm, or in the day-to-day world interactions. So just being still, and then just letting the answer come to you in that sense.
Okay. Uh,
Align.
okay. Thank you. My last question, I promise.
Yes.
So, assertions and denials, I forgot, shapes, shapes our behavior, something like that was there.
Mhm.
Assertions, yes, well-known thing. Denials will put the focus on the problem, right? Not on the coming out or better things. So
Yeah.
explain that denial, please.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because I was also like, wait, denial, how can that be? Right? But using denial as a force to overcome something that is limiting, right? So denying, like you're acknowledging what you're acknowledging this limiting belief, but you're denying its gravity or its effect on you or the power it has on you, right? It's like you're overriding it. It's like, oh, say, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, something like that. You're acknowledging it, but you're overriding it with like, that's not true. I I have tools. I'm smart enough to figure this out one way or another. I could approach either a different coach, mentor, or somebody that is more knowledgeable, and then I will gain this knowledge. And now, once you have this piece of information, you're smart, you're knowledgeable, you're educated. Denying in that sense. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah. So something like denying whatever is not empowering. Uh,
Exactly.
okay, got it. Thank you.
But Bharat, I must say, explaining such book, a book which has so much depth in it, trying to just cover it in 1 hour might be a task in itself. So really kudos to you, Bharat. Really appreciate the effort that you have brought in. You did not
Appreciate it.
miss out probably on any of the important aspects that needs to be, addressed. Really appreciate. Thanks, Bharat.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Luckily, we have recorded it, so we'll put it for everyone's use. Thanks again, Bharat.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Have a great one.